Hey there, I'm Christopher Macor, and welcome to Meditation Happy Hour, which happens every Friday, midday Mountain Time. Today, I'm doing it a little later. I'm doing it on Saturday because there was an update that needed to happen. So today, I'm going to be talking. Well, Meditation Happy Hour is a time when um, I share meditations, processes, perspectives, both traditional and modern. And today I'm going to be talking about growth versus stability. And I'll be sharing a meditation, but it's a pretty advanced meditation. So uh, you might want to check out some of the older videos on this Facebook page. Anyway, I've developed a meditation that I consider I call it the two-way Jacob's ladder, and meaning that it's a stairway between matter and spirit, and a stairway down from spirit to matter. And so, in that process of going up and down the staircase, there are places where it's like when you choose a direction and you move, along that path, the it's not always like a smooth, steady path. There are places where it's harder to move forward than others, and those are called shock points. That's a term that I borrow from the Enneagram, the ancient Enneagram, the one that was promoted by Gurdjieff and John Bennett and Peter Ouspensky. Um, so there's these shock points, these places where there needs to be extra energy, either from inside or from outside, to get through these. They're like knots, they're like hurdles. Um, in astrological terms, they're called uh, ring past me knots. And so there's there's kind of two ways to approach moving through those shock points, right? There's um, and these terms here are meant a bit in jest. One of them's called mushing, and the other is called wild, which stands for wholeness inspired life design. So mushing is where you just, basically you're just kind of like, in a way, forcing the connection. Well, let me explain it a little bit. So if you're moving on if there's a sequence, right, and you're moving along that sequence, and uh, and there's a shock point between there's an element in the sequence, and then the element before the shock point, and then there's the element after the shock point. Mushing would be just trying to merge those two elements, and and then a full mushing is to bring in everything that's before that element that's before the shock point, and then even to kind of look forward to the elements that are past that element that's just past the shock point. Um, and it's literally you're just kind of like groping. It's like, how does this fit together? How does this work? Um, the other way of working is is to have singular uh, times, activities for each of the elements. And then when you practice those singular times, but you do it, with some sense of repetition, like you have a weekly cycle, and you repeat, say one element every week, you repeat each of the elements every week, then when you continue that with repetition, then there starts to occur a bleeding from one element into the other. And what you've effectively done is, if you've created this kind of mushing, but in a more stable way. So the mushing is more kind of growth oriented, and the wild or wholeness inspired life design is more stable. It's more stable, and both of those principles, well, both growth and stability, are important for sustained growth. It's like, if you're not growing, you're basically dying, but if you're growing too much, you can be also dying. It's like you grow past the sustainability of the system, and then you can't, then the system breaks down. So how do these things fit together? Like how do you make sense out of all this? So I'm gonna give an example from my system, from the meditation that I described, the two-way Jacob's ladder. And I'm going to do this briefly. I'm not going to go in depth. I mean, to really understand it, you need to go in depth. But if you're if you're if you have questions along the way, just go back to this Wholeness Geeks Facebook page and look at the other videos, the past videos, and that will help you. So basically, this meditation sequence, the two-way Jacob's ladder, has 13 elements, and the first 4 are what I call the soul kernel. And those 4 elements are a daily life practice. The soul kernel, the 4 elements, they're like a unit in themselves, and it's sort of the foundation of the whole system. So we start off with the dantian, which is the physical center of the body, 3 fingers below and 3 fingers in from the navel. Okay, so then we add pulse. Pulse is one of the 3 body cycles. The other 2 are respiration and sensation. Pulse is kind of a subset of sensation, but any 3 of those body cycles you can observe. They can be a meditation object, and you can find the experience of either of those 3 anywhere in the body. In fact, outside the body too. You can, when you meditate on them, and you get more astute to their presence, you can find them everywhere. So we're gonna feel the pulse down in the dantian. Okay, now we're going to bring in the 6-pointed star, also called the Star of David, the Seal of Solomon, the interlacing triangles. Basically, there's 2 triangles, one facing up, that's evolution, and then one facing down, that's involution. Evolution is matter going back to spirit, and involution is spirit coming into matter. Okay, so that's a yantra, right? A repeating visual is a yantra, just like a repeating sound is a mantra. So we're going to use the pulse to drive our attention around the sides, the 6 sides of these 2 interlacing triangles, right? So we're just allowing the pulse to drive it. We're not moving forward unless we feel the pulse in each. And you can see I'm doing the bottom, the right side, the left side, and then the bottom, the right side, the left side. Okay. Now we're going to add a mantra to that. The mantra is Om Mani Padme Hum, 6-syllable mantra from the Hindu tradition. basically means the whole universe is found within the core of your being. So we're entraining the movement around the sides of these triangles to the pulse and the mantra. We don't say the mantra out loud because if we do, it's hard to feel the pulse. So we just say it silently, right? If I said it out loud, Om Mani Padme Hum. Okay, that's the soul kernel. This is all down in the Dantian. Okay, and this is a daily life practice. Okay, so now we're moving into, and that's like a dimension in itself. It's sort of like 3 dimensions. It's like the 3 dimensions that we live in, as human beings. At this point in the evolution of humanity, we live in 3 dimensions. Bottom line, we live in 3 dimensions. There's not many humans that don't live in 3 dimensions. But now we're going to move into the 4th dimension. And the way that we do that is with a practice which I call contouring. And what we're contouring is inner shapes. So contouring comes from the Tibetan eye chart. The Tibetan eye chart is developed by Tibetan monks. It's a chart you put on the wall at nose level, and then you follow this elaborate diagram, the shape, and you're following it, from the center to the periphery, all the way 360, right? But you're following the edge, basically, of the shape. Well, if you take that principle, that the essence of what you're doing there, and you apply it to take it off the eye chart and take it to say something, if I can follow the edge of this image in the background, or follow the edge of my profile, and you can close your eyes and you can follow the edge of the shapes you're seeing. Okay, so when we do that, when we follow the edge of the shapes we're seeing inside, we're kind of entering the astral realm. Okay, we're kind of, there's this visual field that we don't really have control of what it is, but we have control of how we encounter it and move through it, and that's the contouring. Okay, so, but that's just part of how we're moving. This is part of the shock point here of that we're kind of like going into another dimension. We're not only going into the 4th dimension, but we're going to go into the 5th dimension through the 4th dimension. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to take that star, if you remember that star, right? We're going to, instead of it being vertical like this, we're going to flatten it out, make it horizontal. And now we're going to do that, right? That following the sides of the triangles, except we're going to do it. It's going to be flat, and we're going to wrap that looping around the sides of the triangle. We're going to wrap that around the edge of the shapes that we're seeing, right? So we're combining an uncontrolled visual field with a controlled visual field, and that brings us into the 5th dimension. And keep in mind that this is still in the Dantian, and it's still driven by the pulse, and it's still using a mantra. Actually, when I do this, let's give it a name. I call it I hat because hatt, HATT, is hoop in the tree, and this is an indigenous philosophy of that when you have a hoop around a tree, you're actually representing creation and spirit, or matter and spirit. So that's a hat, a hoop in the tree, and I hat is this process of doing this, for yourself inside with these inner shapes. So it's the eye, and so that process, I call it, when I do that, I do it as a singular activity, which I call a respite, right? Which is, it's just like, so you're, say you're using the soul kernel, those first four elements in your daily life, and then you get like, you have a break where you can like kind of replenish, or you get tired and you need to replenish, so you just, whatever it is, sit down. I usually do a third world squat where you go completely to the ground, feet flat on the ground, and just do that with the inner shapes. So feel, seeing the inner shapes and wrapping that six-pointed star around the edges of the inner shapes down in the dantian, driven by the pulse, with mantra. The one that I usually use is, and when I'm doing the respite, is I am lucid dreaming, because I also do this at night, right? To create a platform from which I can practice lucid dreaming. So the new mantra is I am lucid dreaming, 6 syllables again. Okay, so but we're not stopping there. Okay, so that respite is, that's the respite that um, I have been doing for numerous months, and have sort of brought it into a more exacting and fuller expression. But I realized, like I mentioned before, that sometimes you have to be looking past where you actually want to go. And I realized that, oh, I need to actually bring in the next important element in this two-way Jacob's ladder, and that's the infinite spine. And when realizing that now I need to incorporate that into, the soul kernel and the I hat. I worked with that for a while, and I use the I Ching, like with things like this, where it's really hard to know, well, is this a go, or is this, is this kind of a deviation? I use the I Ching to help kind of guide me, with these things that are sort of hard to ascertain. And I got to go on the bringing in the infinite spine in the respite, right? But it was kind of a partial. It was like, yeah, go, but in the long term, there's going to be, something that needs to change, basically. And as I tried to bring that in, I was like, this isn't quite working that well. And then I realized this variation that I had come upon months, years really before, that hadn't quite found its place. And basically, it was that the way to bring in the infinite spine is, in a sense, virtually. And what I mean by that is that in, that when we're going around the sides, the triangle, each side is infinite, right? So the infinite spine is kind of, it's superimposed upon this activity, this I hatting that I'm already doing. And so that brings in the infinite spine, and it brings in those seem to be the three main elements, or the places where the shock points, there's definite shock points. There's shock points before the inner shapes, or or the I hat. There's a shock point before the I hat, and there's a shock point before the infinite spine. Okay, so I'm doing this, what I call that's I'm doing the mushing, right, within the singular activity. I was trying to do that in the daily life activity. I was trying to extend the soul kernel, and there was a lot of growth that happened there, but then it became unstable, and I had to kind of come back to that basic foundational stability of this soul kernel. But then it was like, all right, well, you're back to that basic stability, but now you've lost that growth um, energy that was just generated. And so I came back, and then I realized that, well, all right, this isn't complete. It's still, there's still, and that's why I'm doing the meditation happy hour today on Saturday as opposed to yesterday on Friday. I did one, well, I tried to do one yesterday and it didn't record, and I realized that, oh, it didn't record because this let's just call it a revelation, wasn't complete. And the completeness now is that the respite has now changed, not only to, it's not just I hat, it's it's the soul kernel plus the I hat plus the virtual infinite spine. If you wanted to give it an acronym, it would be SKIHATTVIS, or ski hat viz. Ski hat viz. So the respite now is the ski hat viz. Now I want to talk about how these kind of fit together, right? So the wholeness inspired life design is about arranging elements in repetition in your life cycle, in your, if it be a daily or a weekly or a monthly or a yearly, you arrange activities, or you exercise elements, and there's a bleed through that happens. So for instance, with the soul kernel, and with the ski hat viz, there's a, so I practice in daily life the soul kernel, and then I do the respite, and when I come back to the soul kernel, that new growth energy is already like infused into the soul kernel, and that's when I go from the soul kernel into the ski hat viz, that stability of the soul kernel is in the respite. So there's this bleed that happens, and in fact, when I'm doing, like, one of my things that I do every week is I've got this very tall stack of books that I read through just a little bit from each book each week, and while I'm reading, I'm practicing soul kernel, but between each book I do the respite. So there's this like alternation that goes through. There's probably 30 books in that pile, at least 30 books in that pile. And so there's a lot of practice of that alternation. So yeah, basically what I realized is that there's a way of incorporating both this mushing and this stability at the same time, simultaneously, and that basically that creates both a movement forward with growth and a stability, so that that growth can keep growing. So that's it. We're basically talking about both are valid, and by having them both in the right proportions within the wholeness inspired life design, it creates sustainable growth. So I'm Christopher Macor, and this has been Meditation Happy Hour. I've been talking to you about growth versus stability. And if you want to know more, you want to ask questions, you want to have a discussion, You can join the Wholeness Geeks Facebook, Wholeness Geeks group, Facebook group. And yeah, and you can even share your own meditations and processes and perspectives. So thanks for listening and watching, and I'll talk to you next time.